It's Christian B., Burnaby, Vancouver-based real estate agent, and welcome to the program. This is Rapid Fire Real Estate, and today I'm going to take you through 4 topics. We're going to spend several minutes on each, and you can take that intel with you out into the marketplace. If you need more help, you can find my contact in the show notes just below. Okay, 4 topics. I want to give you the lay of the land. First, we're going to talk about negotiating savings. When $5K can cost you $1 million. No joke. I'm going to share the story with you. Second is talking about stocks versus real estate, but with an emphasis on stocks. I'm meeting more people these days who are talking about not buying because they're getting such good returns on their stock market investments. We're going to touch on that. Third is Anthem. Anthem is a big builder in the Lower Mainland and in Western Canada, and they had a project here in Burnaby that's kind of gone sideways on them. So I wanted to share with you some highlights from a very good article I wrote that's really going to press home what developers are dealing with and how this can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost of the condo you want to buy. And finally, I just want to talk about timing, being in a rush versus not being in a rush when it comes to buying. Okay, I want to go back and start with when $5K can cost you $1 million. Now, it's interesting. I want to preface this story with, I just had a listing recently in West Coquitlam where we had, reduced the price a couple of times, finally got a couple of buyers that made offers, but nothing came together. And the buyers were kind of haggling and angling for a deal. And I had reduced this 2-bedroom to the point where, we were under $800,000. It was $30,000 cheaper than the same floor plan in the building, just 5 floors higher. Identical in every way. And so when you're a buyer, you obviously want to be working with an agent who will do a comparative market analysis and just look at some of the other sales in the tower or in the sister building and compare these units, and you'll know whether or not you're getting a good deal. I know our psychology sometimes gets the better of us and we still want to angle for a deal. Well, if you've got the last 3 sales were all between 8 and 830, and then you've got the very same listing on the market for 760, hey, that's already a deal at the list price, right? That's a motivated seller. One of the big challenges is getting the seller to sign on the dotted line. Half the time they won't even want to sell their place. You got to do your analysis and see whether or not you're getting a deal. You don't always have to push so hard for every negotiation. Often, the listing agent, in this case me, I've done the negotiating with the seller for you. We've had several 1 to 2 hour conversations on the phone in the evening, and my seller understands if they want to sell it, we've got to be listed sharp, and here's where we're priced. And then you as the buyer, make sure that you've got your agent is instructing you in the right way, so you know if you're getting a deal or not, and it's pretty easy to compare it out. But what I wanted to do is it was interesting. We finally took the listing off the market because it's probably best for my seller if we wait 18 months to a year, 2 years, and then relist it. I just think we'll be able to get another 50,000 more. But what was interesting about it is the agent whose offer was about $5K apart. When his clients walked away, they walked away for $5,000. By the way, if you're a buyer and you're close to buying a home you're going to move in, do you walk away for $5K or do you just come up? Of course you pay the extra $5K because, it's going to be your principal residence. And, 8 years from now, you'll be laughing at how much more your place is valued at. Anyway, he called me back and I had to tell the agent, I'm sorry, it's gone now. And he was a bit crestfallen. He's 5K, these guys were off. It reminds me of a story where I talked a number of years ago with a gentleman, and he told me about his family, and they were looking to buy an investment property, a house in Maple Ridge. And I think they were going back and forth with the seller. And I think they were the home was listed for $470, and I think they got the owner down to $455. And their offer was $450. So literally $5,000 apart. You know what they did? They walked away. I got to shake my head. What do you think that home is worth today? It's worth $1.5 million plus. And this is only just after the Olympics. So 12, 13 years ago. So you can imagine that's an instance where being short-sighted costs you a lot of money down the road. I had an old realtor friend once who told me, she said, Christian, when whoever gets greedy loses. So don't get greedy is what she would always tell her clients. And I remind my buyers, I also remind my sellers of this as well, is that if you're close enough, get the deal done. Okay, so think big picture on that front. Next topic I want to discuss with you here is stocks versus the stock markets versus real estate. I've had a couple of meetings here recently and a number of discussions where buyers are wanting to delay because they think they can get better returns in the stock market. And I think there's a case of recency bias here weighing on their decision making. So it's a big blind spot that you could sail the Titanic through. What I mean by recency bias is just we pay attention to what's happened in the last 18 months, the last 3 years, and we ignore the last 60 years. And when we're looking at the S&P 500, for example, and just full disclosure, I have funds invested in the S&P 500 through index funds, quite a substantial amount, and it's done very well for me, no question about it. But here's the thing, is that that's only been the last 3 years. I mean, if you take the long view of the stock market, there have been some really down periods, and I think a lot of buyers are missing this who have just started investing in the post-coronavirus. If you look at this, for example, in the year 2000, when we had the dot-com bubble burst, here's an interesting example. January of 2000, you would have gotten if you had put $10,000 in, you would have made a profit in the year 2012. It took you 12 years. The early 2000s were a slow, dead period for investing. I mean, I'll read the returns to you here. It's quite something else. The year 2000, stock market down 10%. In 2001, down 13%. In 2002, down 23%. Yeah, that's cumulative now. You're down 46%. It jumped in 2003 by 26%, 9% in 2004, piddly little 3% gain in 2005, a decent 13.5% in 2006, piddly little 3% in 2007, and then 2008, the market craters 39%. That was a tough time to be an investor. And there have been other tough times to be a stock investor. Another would have been anywhere in the 1970s. If you had invested in 1970, you didn't realize a return with inflation adjusted until 1986. That's a 16-year period. So definitely from the late 80s to 2000, it was a growth period. From 2012 until 2024, we have been riding high. But that's not always the case. Stocks are frothy right now. You can see a guy like Warren Buffett, if you follow him, he's been selling some of his favorite holdings, which tells you he thinks they're overpriced. Apple is, of course, the biggest holding in his stock portfolio. But what I want to impress upon you here is that when you have your own place, you've got a roof over your head. You got the keys to the castle. And it's the Get Rich Slowly program. So in the long run, here in the greater Vancouver area, we've seen prices double about every 15 to 20 years. Okay? You'll be fine if you pay your own mortgage. It's going to be high in the outset, definitely higher than renting. And I know that sucks. But it's just like any business. When you start it, it's the first 3-4 years that are always the toughest. And once you gain traction, you'll be fine. But just, again, what I want you to understand here is stocks do not always go up. And if you're just looking at the last 3 years, let's say the last 2 years here, we've had gains of 24% in 2023, and the market is up 25% so far in 2024. I like it. My portfolio is doing great. But it ain't going to be like this. We could go through a stretch of 10, 12 years where it just plods along. So, and then you see real estate jump. And I find that when you, it seems to be the time you get into the market informs your thinking of it. What I mean is I've got a friend back home in Toronto who he invested in that 2008 period and took a beating, and he has avoided stocks ever since. So maybe he was just unlucky in terms of the time he got into the market. And so the folks getting into the market the last couple of years have done really, really well. But it ain't always like that. Okay, I wanted to jump forward to a very interesting article I found that was included on a Reddit post. And it was very informative on what's going on for builders like Anthem. Anthem's one of the big builders here in Western Canada, especially in the Lower Mainland. And they've got a project called Citizen just across from Metrotown that's been in a bit of a holding period for some time. And it's literally adding $100,000 to the cost of a single unit. Ouch, if you're a buyer. But it also shows you what hurdles developers have to jump, and if the cities make it too difficult in terms of the permitting process, you can see how this causes the costs of your condos to increase. Well, let's start off with this. I'm going to give you the Coles highlights for it. And originally, the project was expected to cost $480 million. It was supposed to be two towers, 33 stories high. Carrying costs were estimated at $150,000 to $300,000 per month. So that's presumably the loan, the interest on the loan that they're paying, that they bought the land with. And they estimated, Anthem here, estimated a $300 per square foot subsidy for below market rentals. So a portion of this strata was going to be for below market. 4 years later, the project cost jumped by over $100 million to $580 million. And this will add $100,000 to the cost of each condo. Now, what's happening here? How did it jump by $100 million? Well, what happened is the city of Burnaby actually made a mistake with the planning process. And what happened is they realized, unfortunately, I guess a year later, that they wanted to have larger sidewalks for pedestrian use. And so they couldn't fit two towers. They could only fit one. So they told Anthem, well, you're going to have to just get it all into one tower. So they went from 33 to 66 stories on a single tower. But what this does is it raises the construction costs, because now you've got to buy a lot more concrete. You've got to rent a different kind of construction crane for a lot longer. I think it would have added another 11 months. And even the cost of the type of windows they would need rises by $2 million. So there's a lot of these kinds of curveballs that come at developers. I mean, the article, the writer also mentioned, city planners, not Burnaby particularly, but other municipalities where, at the last minute, they'll say, hey, we want you to throw a coffee shop into the condo, at the ground floor. And all of a sudden they have to redesign everything, and it takes time. It costs a lot of money. You're paying architects. They might say, the city planners might say, well, we want the color of the tiles to change. And again, now they're adding tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of this building because they're trying to find different colored tiles. Anyway, moving along, I think we've kind of touched on the key parts, but I mean, even this construction crane, original plans were to have it rented for 40 months. Now they have to rent it for an extra 15 months, 55 months. You can imagine how much they're paying. They're not paying $50,000 plus for a single construction crane. And it just gives you an example of some of the things that are going on behind the scenes for developers. And of course, interest rates went through the roof in 2022. You could imagine how much more, hundreds of thousands of dollars, that would added to their monthly holding costs. So it's very understandable how a lot of developers, not a lot, but a good handful here in the Vancouver area have gone bankrupt because they can't absorb these costs. And I didn't even mention anything about rising labor costs or materials as well. So, pay attention to that. Pay attention to how quickly your city halls are getting these projects approved. I think it's very important that we, I had someone at a big developer one time say to me, Christian, the United States announced and put a man on the moon faster than we can get a tower built here in Vancouver. And I think JFK mentioned it in 1961. They had someone on the moon in 1969. So if it takes 8 years to build a tower, I mean, that's unacceptable. It's got to be a lot fast. Turnaround times need to be a hell of a lot faster than that. Okay, last point is being in a rush. And this is when I meet buyers, I can tell if someone's high level or if someone's, entry level and they're kind of really struggling with a decision. A high level individual will just say, okay, well, when the right property comes around, I'll pull the trigger. And people who are, getting used to it, they haven't made big money decisions. They'll say something like, oh, I'm not in a rush. It's like a knee-jerk defense mechanism. And guys, I would say being in a rush is not the point. It's about finding the right property for you. If it's the third or fourth home, hey, that's good enough. You don't have to be a perfectionist here, and you're generally not going to find the home that's going to tick all the boxes. The reason I mention that is I just think that adding more time, looking for a home over 9 months versus 9 weeks is not going to make for a better decision. In many cases, the individual or the couple that buys a home in 9 weeks will make a better decision and get a better quality home than those folks who waited 9 months. And that's a lot of time to lose that you could be spending with family and friends as well. I think that if you sort of collapse, there's something that happens when you have very serious targets, something like, you say, look, I want to be moved in by Valentine's Day. It tends to focus your mind, and you just you make a better decision in that time because you're so focused on it. Maybe I'm not explaining it as well as I'd like to, but when you delay something and delay it and drag it out, the quality of the decision is quite poor. And I guess just because your mind tends to be on many other things. Okay. So my advice to you would be when you're ready to pull the trigger is have a specific date, and it'll help you make a better decision. All right, we'll see you next time.